Guys, I'm going to do two videos here. One cardboard run, and this video is going to be about my thoughts on edge geometry, grinds, and all that stuff. You'll have to forgive me if I'm not very concise or eloquent in the manner I explain things, or just generally fuck shit up. It's easier to have thoughts in your head and understand it than it is to explain it out loud. That's one of the things I have problems with, so you have to bear with me with that. So let's get started. I'm just going to draw some things down. If we're looking at the knife, this is a knife from Joe Calton. I hope I pronounced that right. I traded him a knife for one of mine, and I really like this knife just overall. Then he has a leather sheath, which is just, I'm not really big into leather sheaths, but I am now because this thing is just super fantastic. But if we're gonna, I forgot what I was originally trying to point out, we're gonna look at the grind from this way, like this, looking down it. That's how I'm gonna draw it on here. So what I shoot for, this is what I'm gonna shoot for, and I'm gonna put down other knives, different uses, kind of stuff like that. Most of my knives I just ground almost to zero, but I do testing to make sure they're gonna hold up. So I know we related a lot of stuff before, but I never actually drew anything out. Now this is pretty shitty drawing, but so this first one, it has a steeper angle, so this is probably something I'd do for a really heavy use knife, but you can see it goes all the way down to a full edge, almost zero. This second one I have here is what I consider kind of like an EDC kind of grind. It has a higher grind, or the primary grind angle is lower than the hard use, which is this one here. Hopefully that music's not too loud. Okay, and this one tapers down, and the primary grind angle is actually lower, so you'll have less friction in it when cutting. This next one here, this one is what I generally see or hear about when they talk about heavy use knives. Very thick stock, very high primary grind angle, and then the edge is left relatively thick. So if you take an axe and or a splitting maul, that's probably the best example. I don't think I have one around here. Most of my videos are off the cuff and unrehearsed, so if I just look around as I'm doing something, that's because I didn't pre-plan that. But I think it gives some originality to the video, so that's why I keep it like that. But anyways, this is where they leave the edge. So then when they do put the edge on, it's usually pretty steep, like that. So you get a very strong amount right in here. This is very strong, so it's more like a chisel than an actual knife. So if you're doing a lot of prying with the knife, that's great. Or just generally smacking it around, that's also excellent. This one is better. It's kind of hard use, or in between that, but it has a lower primary grind angle, but they still leave the edge relatively thick. So when they do put the edge on, it's going to cut better than this style, but you're still going to have a lot of resistance. And everything's a balance. I mean, if you have different steels or a different kind of heat treat, you're going to need to do some experimenting, and that's what I've been doing. That's the reason I test a lot of my knives and send a lot of my knives out to test is so I can get an accurate idea of where I stand with a certain steel, a certain heat treat, grind, or etc. Another thing I want to address is the way I do my hollow grinds. Most of them, unless I specify otherwise, they're always going to be a relief style hollow grind. What that means is if you're looking at the knife directly down like that, instead of having a real deep, kind of like a half moon style, I tried to shoot for a very shallow hollow. So these are very much exaggerated, but this is a really deep hollow, and the wheel, when they grind it, it fits in here, and that gives them that. I hold mine at a degree, so many degrees of what I'm trying to do, the type of grind I'm trying to do on it, to the wheel, and I think I illustrated that in one of my other videos. But this is kind of the style I go for. So instead of having just flat, I kind of have just a little relief back here, just so it's a little bit easier to sharpen. You could argue it makes a keener edge. I know there's been a lot of debate about that on certain places, certain forums. I really don't have a favorite either way. I'm not a big fan of chisel grind. I don't know why. I don't really have any data to back that up, but I'm just not a huge fan of it to start with. But every other grind is, I think, great grind. That's just kind of my ideas, what I'm going for. So here's a few examples. Here's that knife from Joe Calton. Now this is appears to be 5/32 stock. It goes down to a relatively thin edge. So I would put this in a good cutting but harder use type of knife. It's not going to cut as well as pure cutting knives, but it's going to take more abuse than the pure cutting knives such as I have here. This is just one of mine. It's a very high grind, a wider blade, 140 thou stock, and then thinner edge. But that's what I was explaining. The angle per side is lower since the blade is so wide. Now this will not stand up to really heavy abuse, as I illustrated in the last cutting tests. What happened with that? It failed in the right spot, but nonetheless it still failed. Another example. This is a pretium from Elliot at Ferrum Forge. This is kind of a harder use, but still a pretty good cutting ability. It's 3/16 stock, ground down to around 15 degrees, or 50. This is what I was talking about, that eloquence. It's 15 degrees per side and about 15 thou thick. The only real problem I have with this is actually the choil. That choil area there, which you'll see in the next video, becomes a problem when cutting. Sometimes the cardboard will hang up on there. That's the only real issue I have with this knife. But we'll get into that in the next video. But these are the three knives I have here, and we're going to split up into two videos because it's easier and it uploads faster, and it's just an all-around better deal. You're not trying to accomplish so much in one video, and I know it's going to be a substantial video because I have a lot of cardboard to cut. So we'll go from there. And if anybody's wondering why the glass is on, a recent emergency room trip to get a piece of metal in my eye was less than fun. So I decided to invest in some protective eyewear, which I now wear all the time when working, basically anywhere. They're just Oakley flat jacket transitions, so I can wear them all the time, inside, outside, all like that. So that'll be it for this video, and I'll start another one.